Uh-huh. Okay, Shkoyach. Welcome everyone. Good to see all of you. We are on Daf Yud Tes Amud Aleph, 19a, and we basically finished the sugya of this P Tikra, which is quite a sugya. I did discuss it with a Paisik about the laws of P Tikra, and he liked what I said about the option of that it could be that the reason in the earlier Gemara that um, you cannot use pitikra, and the Mishnah had said that you can't do the good achis mechitzasa, you can't say good achis because the the goats can go under, so you can't say good achas. So the question we had was, so why can't you say pitikra? Let the wall come down, and be a wall from the roof. Forget about the good achas that you have a problem with the with the goats. So the answer that I gave was that, well, it could be that because you have the wall there, it blocks the edge of the ceiling. And in order for you to be able to say good achis, you need to see the edge of the ceiling of the and if you have a wall that's blocking it, it would be a problem. So in other words, theoretically, you could say good achis if it was done if it was situated in a way, you could say pitikra, even though you have the good achis that doesn't work, because good achis, we said, there's a problem because if there's a hole on the bottom. But pitikra is not a problem, even though it's open, and therefore the only thing is that there are other qualifications that you need to have. There's other criteria that you need to have in order for pitikra to kick in, and one of them is you have to see the edges, and the other is that it also has to have a certain thickness. In order to say pitikra, you need to have a certain thickness to it. So because of these things, not necessarily are you able to say pitikra? But if you could say pitikra, even if there's something else there, it shouldn't block it from saying pitikra. And so, in other words, basically on the question we asked yesterday, does the fact that you have a wall there, does that block pitikra? No, shouldn't block it. And the only thing is, it might be that it's covering it, therefore you can't see the edge, which is the Gemara that we learned yesterday and the day before. That if it's equal, if you don't see the edge, you can't say pitikra. Then going back to Ezra's question before, with regard to people walking through, does that, if there's a special pathway that they walk on, will that ruin the entire pitikra? But they're really limited to a certain area of it, and it seems that it does. The fact is, they're walking through, they're breaking the area that seems like that would ruin the ability to say pitikra, even though they're only going one part of it. The fact is, it's the pitikra can't kick in. Yes, David.
My memory is not so good, so if you can translate just at the beginning of this year, P Tikra and Godakas again, not throughout, but just once at the beginning of the hour.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. So these are both methods that are ways of imagining a wall. One of them is called pitikra. If you see the edge of the ceiling and it comes to a closing, there's a flat, like a rectangular, clear end to this ceiling, that we consider like a wall. It's a halachic wall called pitikra. The edge of the roof is yored v'soisem. It goes down and it closes it up, makes it like a wall. Good achis meant that you have 10 handbreadths of a wall that's hanging, and we want to extend it further down. So you already have a wall. Its only problem is that it's not really a full wall. It's only a partial wall. It's 10 handbreadths, about 31.5 inches, according to Rabbi Avram Chaim Noah. And you want to extend that wall downward. The thing is that there's a law called good asik and good aches. Good asik would mean you extend the wall upward. Good aches means you extend the wall downward. And the Mishnah that we learned on page, was it 17 or 16? It mentioned page 16 A. It mentioned over there that that there's an argument if you're allowed to use this concept of good aches because goats can get through on the bottom. And so good Achas had a problem of goats going through. And interestingly enough, good Pitikra doesn't seem to be worried and concerned about the issue of goats going through. And it has something to do with the fact that this is a halacha l'meishemi Sinai. It's a law given to Moses at Sinai that this is it's completely closed in, and that's how it's considered. Um, um, in other words, it's not a law that it's making it a mechitza, that it's making it a wall. It's closed. It's just saying it's closed in. So, a hanging wall we want to extend, then we'll say, well, the goats are coming down. You can't say it's a wall. But to say that it's closed in as a halacha l'meishemi Sinai, that you just close it in, that's that somehow we're able to say it's closed in, even if goats go down. The halacha is we consider it as if it's closed. So that's those are the rules. Okay, so again, let's just review the Gemara that we little of the Gemara that we did yesterday. Most of the Gemara was really a review already for the day before. So let's just review a little of the new stuff from yesterday that we basically mentioned about the second version of this whole discussion. The whole discussion that we had started on page 18A, and that's where this whole topic of Pitikra kicked in. It started on 18A, where we had an argument of Abaye and Rava. And the question really is, where does their argument apply? What was the case of their argument? So the first version is the version that was taught in Surah. And that version is that the argument of Abaye and Rava applied where you have a portico that goes around the whole apartment building, and you have this ledge that follows this whole of the entranceways of the apartment building, which is shaped like the letter Ches. It goes over, there's a north side, a south side, and an east side, and you basically you see a ledge that doesn't end. It just continues going all along the building. And it's like, imagine a one-story apartment building that has like three wings. It goes north, and then it has the east side, and then it has the south side. So you have this ledge going around it. So the argument of Abaye and Rava are, if there is no pillars holding up that ledge, there's no poles even holding up that ledge, it's somehow being held up from the wall of the apartment building, and it's just hanging. It's a ledge. And can you use that ledge for Pitikra Yerid V'Seisim? That's the question. May consider it a wall. And ultimately, what you're doing is putting schach from one side of the ledge to the other, from the north side to the south side. You have schach, like bamboo sticks, hanging on that ledge. And you've got yourself a good sukkah if you could say Pitikra if you have a wall. The problem is that the walls of the apartment building are too far. They're 4 cubits or more. So the apartment building walls are not good. So the question is, can we use the law of Pitikra here? And Pitikra would mean that, well, the ledge ends, and that end of the ledge that edge is considered like a wall. According to Halacha l'Maishim Sinai, this is a special law that it's considered like it's closed off. And since it's considered closed off, it should be considered should be kosher to be a wall for a sukkah. So you have the edge of the ledge, and you have schach. You're all set. You got a sukkah right there. Now that's Abaye, and for some reason Rava argues on that, and that's where initially the Gemara thought that Rava argues on it because You can't do P-Tikra for all of your walls. You need at least one or two solid walls. Then you could say P-Tikra. That was the initial thought. And then the final thought of the Gemara, the final understanding of the Gemara is that the problem Rava has is that these walls are based on the ledge. They're coming from the ledge. The ledge is meant to cover the portico area. It's not meant to cover the courtyard area. And because it's meant to cover the portico area, so you can't use an imaginary wall now and say, oh, it's also a wall for your sukkah. There's no wall. You want to say halachically there's a wall. Yeah, there's a wall halachically for the portico because it's built for the portico. This is the edge of that portico, so that edge makes a wall for it. But now you're using an imaginary wall and say, oh, I've got an imaginary wall there for my sukkah also on the other side. Oh, we've got a wall. You can't do that. That's what Rava says. Rava says, no, it's only imaginary. It's not a real wall. And you can't use it then for a second thing. You want to use it for the portico, no problem. So in Hilchas Eruvin, this works. In Hilchas Sukkah, there's a problem. Because in Eruvin, you just need a post-it. It doesn't matter. It's on this side. It's helping. The main thing is to help that inside area. So it'll benefit it. But in Sukkah, the portico is going to be a problem because you don't want to use that portico area as a sukkah. The schach is not kosher. You need to use the opposite side for the sukkah. So that's why the P-Tikra, or the way Rava understands it, it normally is not going to work in a sukkah. Because where are you going to use a P-Tikra type of sukkah? Your house overhangs? Is that where you want to use it? You have an overhang, or you have something, let's say you have a flat roof and it goes beyond. So you want to use, a slanted roof doesn't work for P-Tikra. It has to be flat. So flat roof. So let's say you have a flat roof that has an overhang. Okay, so you want to use, and it has to be it has to be squared. It can't be rounded. It can't be round. It has to be, sharp edges. So you want to use that as your P-Tikra. Well, it won't work because that wall that we're going to call a P-Tikra will work for under the ledge, but it won't work for beyond the ledge. And your sukkah is all about beyond the ledge. That's where your schach is. So the concept of P-Tikra, according to this, is going to be very hard to work for sukkah. However, and this is what's interesting, is Rashi has a case here that we learned that you could maybe do P-Tikra for a sukkah. And the reason why, according to Rashi, you could do it for a sukkah is because Rashi holds that a P-Tikra can be done when you have a temporary roof. Many of the other Rishonim say that you can't use P-Tikra on a temporary roof. A ledge of a house, yes, but you want to use P-Tikra on a temporary roof? No. The halacha l'maaseh b'sinai doesn't apply to it. Temporary roof is not part of it. But Rashi holds it is part of it. And the way Rashi learns the Gemara, he has to learn that way because the case that he understands the Gemara to be talking about is that you're using your schach as a P-Tikra. That was one of the cases there on page 18b, that you had schach that you want to use for your P-Tikra. So according to Rashi, you're using schach for P-Tikra. It means that you can use a temporary roof for P-Tikra. So according to Rashi, it comes out a very interesting thing. And I don't know that this applies to la halacha, because I don't know if we ask him like Rashi. So I don't think it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. But there is an opinion of Rashi, good to know, that Rashi holds that theoretically in Sukkah, you could have examples of P-Tikra. You could make a Sukkah, according to Rashi, if you had these boards that are, the way Rashi seems to hold, they have to be thick, 1 tefach thick as your schach, and you put them on your sukkah. You don't need walls because the P-Tikra, the schach itself, will be a wall. So you could put your schach, and That would be the wall for the sukkah. Put one beam around, that's your roof. And then now you have walls because you have your pitikra, your v'saisim, and then fill in the roof with the rest of your schach. And so theoretically, you could have, according to Rashi, a pitikra. Now, according to Taisvis, it wouldn't work. But according to the other Rishonim, it wouldn't work. Number one, because it's temporary, and temporary temporary roof, you don't say pitikra. And number two, you would need to have 4 handbreadths of a board in order to say pitikra, according to Taisvis. And once you have a 4 handbreadth board for schach, that would be a problem because you're not allowed to use 4 handbreadth board for schach. Although it's not a major problem because I guess you could just use that for the edge of your sukkah and then use the inside. So I guess according to Taisus, you could also, if in other words, the big problem, the real problem is that it's a temporary roof. That's the real problem. So according to Taisus, you can't do it. I'm just thinking if the other problem is really a problem. It's not really a problem, I guess, because you could use a board maybe around your sukkah, and the board would basically just be the edge of your the board would be at the edge of the sukkah. That's an interesting thought. I guess you could probably get away with that. But the real problem would be that the sukkah is temporary. So, but according to Rashi, you could theoretically say pitikra yerd v'saisam. You could have cases of pitikra by a sukkah. Again, I don't think it would fit la halacha because I don't think the halacha allows it on a temporary dwelling, but Rashi holds it does. So according to Rashi, you could have such a thing. Okay, so that was basically the first version of the Gemara. And that version of the Gemara, again, that's the way they learned in Surah. And that version of the Gemara said, what happens if you have you have poles or pillars that are holding up the ledge? Would those be able to be used as lavud, we consider it as if they're all attached and make them into a wall around your sukkah if you had poles? So this version of the Gemara said, yes, everyone, even a Rava would agree that would work. Lavud would work, and Pitikra would not work, because Pitikra is an imaginary wall, and that doesn't work for the other side. It would only work for what it's covering. But Lavud would work. Well, Lavud is considered all closed up. So if it's all closed up, it's a wall. We look at it as a wall. That wall will work for both sides. So that's the understanding of the first version. Then the Gemara said that in Pumpadisa, they have another version. What's the version in Pumpadisa? The version in Pumpadisa is that if there's no pillars on the ledge, everyone agrees it's invalid. Why? For the same reason that Rava said before it's invalid. The pillars, if there's no pillars, the ledge is meant, you could say pitikra, it'll cover the ledge. It's not going to cover the other side. And the way I explained it, unless you have another better explanation, my understanding of it is that it has to do with the fact that this is an imaginary wall. You can't go build on that imaginary wall. You could say it's a wall for the ledge, but you can't start building and saying, oh, let's use that wall to build another sukkah from it. It's not a wall. It's only a halachic wall for the ledge. You can't start using that for other areas. So that's the first version. The next version, before I do the second version, I should just mention, so how does this fit with the Mishnah? The Mishnah had said that if you don't have these pillars or poles under the ledge, the Mishnah said that the sukkah is invalid if it's 4 cubits. If the ledge is 4 cubits, sukkah is invalid. And we are just mentioning that it's an argument between Abai and Rava, and Abai holds it is valid. So how could that be? How could you say that it's valid? How could Abai say it's valid? It seems like he's contradicting the Mishnah. You can't argue on a Mishnah. The Mishnah says it's not valid if it's 4 cubits. So the Gemara's answer to that, anyone remember what the Gemara's answer was? The Mishnah seems to be a very clear proof against Abaye. The Mishnah says there's no pole, no pillars. You got a ledge, and it's 4 cubits. The width of that ledge is 4 cubits. And the Mishnah says you can't use that sukkah. The sukkah is in the middle. It goes from ledge to ledge. And the ledge ruins your sukkah. It's too big. If it was smaller, it would work. But it's 4 cubits. It doesn't work. And Bias says, no, it works. It's fine. Bias says it works. So how do we reconcile that with Abaye? How does Abaye understand that? So the Gemara said that Rava answers the question for Abaye, and he says that the case was that the schach is not on top of the ledge. The schach is going from one side of the ledge to the other. It's caught in between. It's tight. They're squeezed in between the two ledges, and it's being maybe held up. Maybe there's some type of a holder below that's holding it up, but it's basically not allowing you to see the edge of the wall. And that's why in that case, what rules are you subject to? You're subject to the rules of Doif and Akuma, which are limited to 4 cubits. But the rule of Pitikra is not going to kick in because you don't have an edge of a ledge to use as a wall. So Abaye, who holds you could use an edge of a ledge for a wall for a sukkah that's outside, he says there you don't have the edge of the ledge because it's not visible because the schach is blocking it. So when you're sitting in that sukkah, you don't see the edge of the ledge because the schach is blocking it. So instead, so that's the case of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is limited to 4 cubits. But our case of Abaye and Rava, this story of this scenario of Abaye and Rava is not limited to 4 cubits. You could have 100 cubits ledge. And the fact is, according to Abaye, it's going to be kosher because the edge of the ledge is considered like a wall, and it considers it a wall even for what's outside of the wall. And that wall is considered a sukkah. That was the way he answers. That's the way they answer the Mishnah. Okay, now in Pumpadisa, they had a different way of explaining this argument. In Pumpadisa, they explained the argument to be that you put schach on top of an achsadra, on top of this portico, and it's the same type of portico. You got this ledge that goes on all 3 sides, and you're putting schach on top of it, and there is no pillars. In that case, everyone will agree that it's invalid, and that's because of the reason of Rava. Now, what happens if it does have pillars, or it does have these poles that are holding up the ledge? So if it has poles and their poles are situated every 3 handbreadths, every 9 inches, you got a pole. So in that scenario, in that scenario, it'll be an argument Abaye and Rava, and Abaye is going to say it's kosher. You can use loved, and Rava is going to say that you can't use loved. Rava is going to say that it's puzzle. Why can't you use loved? Because loved, according to Rava, the way he sees it, this is the way I explained it yesterday, is that he sees loved to be an imaginary wall. So an imaginary wall, it works for what it's really protecting, and that's protecting under the portico. And you can't go and take that imaginary wall and use it for the other side. It's only an imaginary wall. But Abaye sees it that this is not an imaginary wall. This is a wall. We're calling this a wall. Less than 3 handbreadths is not significant, and therefore it's considered a wall. This is lattice. Lattice is a wall. It has holes in it. It has windows. It has this, but it's a wall. This is considered a wall. The law of Loved says that is considered a wall. It's considered a wall. So does the wall, if there's a wall, it could be used for whatever you want it to. If you want to call it an imaginary wall, then you could start debating, well, if it's imaginary, then maybe it only works. It's only imaginary. You can start building on an imaginary wall. But if it's a real, this is called a wall. Once it's called a wall, then it has the law of a wall, and therefore you could use it. So that's the argument of Abaye and Rava. But then the Gemara immediately says that, but Bihilchasa Kalish Nakama, the halacha follows the first lashon, the first version of this, the way it was taught in Surah, and the halacha follows Rava that that we don't say pitikra. We're not going to say pitikra because it's covering the area under the portico, the pitikra. It's not going to help for the area beyond the portico. So that's the yesterday David mentioned to us an interesting point that why does the Gemara tell us Hilchas Kalishna Kama? Why does the Gemara tell us that the halacha is like Kalishna Kama? Because normally when you have two versions and the Gemara gives one first and one second, normally you follow the second one. So here the Gemara made sure to be clear and tell us that in this scenario we paskin like the Lishna Kama. Okay, and then the final piece of Gemara that we did yesterday was getting a little complicated. It had to do with the third wall of a sukkah, and how do you they went to this rabbi's house and they saw he only had two walls of his sukkah, and he wanted to, it seemed like he was using the portico as a wall for his sukkah. So this is very connected to this Gemara, because if the halacha follows Rava, you can't use a portico to be a wall. You can't say pitikra when it comes to sukkah. Why can't you? Because the portico wall is covering the portico. It's not covering outside the portico. So here, Rav Tahana seemed like he was using a portico. He was using that wall, the pitikra wall, for his sukkah, for his third wall of the sukkah. And of course, we know that you could be lenient on the third wall. Even a tefach is good, but you got to have something. You can't use pitikra. So they tried to figure out like how could his sukkah, how was he eating in this sukkah? So they told him, don't you know that Rava says that if it doesn't have poles, you can't say pitikra. You need the poles could work, lovin could work, but pitikra doesn't work, and you can't use this as a sukkah. So he showed them that it actually has an extra one tefach, the type of extension that you don't see from both sides. It's only visible on one side, and that's why it's considered a kosher sukkah. So he's got two walls and a handbreadth. Now, if you remember, back in the Gemara, when we talked about the two walls and a handbreadth, we had a few different opinions as to how to situate that handbreadth, where that handbreadth is situated. And the Gemara here on page 19a, it mentions that the handbreadth might be at the facing the other way, which means that instead of facing into the sukkah, and so you have 2.5 walls, 2 walls and a tefach, it's actually, no, you have an L-shaped sukkah, and then you have a little beam, a handbreadth wide, that's actually extended out of that L-shaped area. Now, instead of going into the L-shaped area, it's extended the opposite direction. And that seems very surprising. How could that tefach be kosher for a sukkah? So that for a wall, how can it be for a third wall of your sukkah? That handbreadth is sticking out. It's not exactly a sukkah. I think we saw the picture yesterday. So this is, of course, the topic of discussion among the commentaries. And interestingly enough, Taisus doesn't even answer this question. He's stuck to trying to figure out how this could work. The top Taisus over here, he says, how would this be? And he says, you might want to say, well, since it works for Shabbos, so maybe you'll have that same logic that the Gemara used on an earlier page, that if something is good for Shabbos, so it's going to be good for Sukkot as well. It's called a wall. It's called, so since it's going to be good for the Eruv, on Shabbos, it's going to be considered a wall for Sukkah. So maybe you're going to want to say that. He says, no way. because this sukkah Rav Kahana used all week long. You can't rely on something that was kosher for Eruv, that it's going to be kosher for Shabbos, for Sukkot. That would mean it would be kosher only for the Shabbos of Sukkot. He's using this all week long. He's using the Sukkah. So that logic could work maybe for the Shabbos of Sukkot. So it's not going to work for the whole week. And Taisus also says that logic doesn't work if one of them is rabbinic and one of them is biblical. He says the law of Eruv is rabbinic, so you're going to use that and consider it a wall. That would be a rabbinic law. And for Shab on Pesach on Sukkot, you need a halachic, you need a biblical wall. So a rabbinic wall is one thing. This is you're trying to make a biblical wall. You can't necessarily do that. Anyway, so Taisa seems to leave it up in the air how that works. Now, this is all a problem if you learn the case is talking about that the board is faced the opposite direction. But if the board is faced inside to the inner area where you have the L-shaped two walls, and then you have on the third wall is attached to one of the two walls, and it goes the same direction as the parallel wall of it, then it's no problem. That's the third wall. There's a tevach. So it's fine. He didn't see it. He was standing outside maybe, but he didn't see it. The rabbi who questioned Rav Kahana, Rav Ashi, questioned Rav Kahana. So he didn't see it, but it was inside. So that would work. But what about the other?
It is always touching one of the other two walls.
It's touching it, but which direction is it?
Right, and it's going in inward way so that it's forming the outline of the
of a third wall, of a sukkah. Is it forming an outline of a sukkah, or is it forming an entranceway, outside?
Right.
It's very
leading out.
Yeah, it's leaving out. How could that be considered a wall of a sukkah? It definitely seems surprising. And the commentaries we mentioned yesterday, a few commentaries, how they explain it. That it's really we're dealing with a case where it's not as simple as it sounds. It must be, one of the understandings is that there really is a tsuras hapesach here. You have you really have one more beam that's holding up the ledge. You have another beam on the other that's holding up the ledge, so to speak, and it's considered a tsuras hapesach. It's considered a doorway. And that makes it that biblically this is a third wall according to halacha. So that would work to be considered a wall. And Rav Kahana, if you look back on page 7, where you have the opinions, that was where we learned about this whole thing on page 7. So it says that where page 7, it talked about this third wall, and it says over there that tefach, where do you place it? So one said keneged hayotzei, and you put it the tefach, where do you put it? So one of the opinions over there was that keneged Reish Tor. If you remember this, it was it was the beginning of the Gemara started on page 6b, the bottom line over there, the bottom 3 lines, I should say. So where do you stick it? So the first opinion was you put it on a diagonal Reish Tor. Then the other one just said no, that it's Yema'amidoi keneged hayotzei, and you put it, as you would be going out, just the typical. You would
I always pictured the two walls as an L.
Well, the two walls are
longer, one shorter. So the way we're going now, that little tefach has to come out of either the foot of the L going upwards, or the top of the L going to the right.
Right.
Because that encloses the area.
Correct.
We're saying now the Gemara never has a case where that one tefach is in just the open area connected to nothing. You can't have that little tefach across from the top of the L and up from the bottom of the L. It has to be connected to one part of the L.
Not necessarily.
Either really, or through a halachic thing like
right.
Dofin Akuma or one of the other ones that work.
Love it.
Really.
So Rav Simon, in the name of Rabbi Shua, some say Rabbi Shua ben Levi says you make it a thick tefach, meaning it's not a very tight tefach. It has a little extra, a little more than a handbreadth, and you put it next to the wall within 3 handbreadths, and that's considered love. And then the Gemara says that. Then the Gemara says afterwards that that Amar Rava ain't any teres ela b'tzuras haPesach, that it's only permitted with a tzuras haPesach. So the understanding is that the Gemara is a little complicated. So some say what he means is that it's an option to either have this or that. You need either a tzuras haPesach or a tefach, or it could be that it means that either you only can use the tzuras haPesach, or it means that you can use also a tzuras haPesach, or it means you need both tzuras haPesach and the tefach. Hanami tzuras haPesach. There's a few different ways of learning it. And Rav Ashi found Rav Kahana that he did a tefach, more than a tefach, and he did it also a tzuras haPesach. So he says, isn't it enough to do one? So he says, no, I hold you need both. You need the tzuras haPesach. So who is that opinion? That's Rav Kahana at both. So here also, it seems like he's doing the tzuras haPesach. That's the understanding here, is that Rav Kahana says his sukkah, he already told us, Rav Ashi once found him, page 7, he was looking at his sukkah. So here Rav Ashi again comes and checks out Rav Kahana's sukkah, second time over here, and he says, you got a tzuras, so it must be that there was a tzuras haPesach there also, and in addition to having this tefach of this extra tefach. So since he had a tzuras haPesach, he had what?
This is the first recorded sukkah hop.
Well, or it might have been the same. Might have been the same time. It was bothering him about the tzuras haPesach, and maybe that's a continuation of this.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's the first. You tell the kids, hey, you want to see it? And one Rav went to the other one sukkah to check it out.
Check it out. Or he might have been a student to Rav Ashi, to Rav Kahana. I don't know. You have to look up in the book of who was older. But anyway, so here also, so that's one of the understandings here, is that it's the sukkah had a tzuras haPesach, and it's called a mechitza, and Rav Kahana holds it needs that, and in this case, this tefach of the beam is only rabbinic, and even if it's not visible in the sukkah, it's going to be kosher, and so that's the understanding, that even though you need it, he holds you need both, but it's good enough even if it's sticking outward. And then the Rosh has an interesting opinion that it's that really the pitikra is kosher. Pitikra. This is what do you mean? We just said you can't use pitikra. Nah, biblically you can use pitikra. It's rabbinically you can't build on a pitikra for an area that's outside. This is a very huge revolutionary opinion that biblically it really is kosher for pitikra. And it's only rabbinic. He says since it's only rabbinic, then you can have the tefach even if it's not visible. It's on the outside. That tefach will be considered like the third wall. So anyway, he comes out with a new law about the third wall, according to this, according to what we're seeing here, that third wall could be even if it's sticking outward. Quite a interesting sukkah. Okay. But that was the final Gemara. In fact, maybe I will just read that. I'm just going to read it one more time inside. the story. Ravashi Ashkache Rav Kahana. So we're about 12 lines, maybe 15 lines from the top of the page on 19a. Ravashi Ashkache Rav Kahana. Ravashi saw that Rav Kahana, to call Masach al Gabi Achsadra, he was being Masachich, he was putting schach on the portico. And what that means is that he basically had his sukkah, to an L-shaped sukkah right near the portico, and he was using that as, it looked like he was using that as his third wall. And so he's masachich on top of the achsadra. And the Gemara says she'ein lo petzimin, and it didn't have any poles. Amalei lo savar mar. So Ravashi told him, he says, "Don't you hold Hadam and Rava? Don't you know about what Rava says? Yesh lo petzimin kshera, that if it has poles, it's kosher. Ein lo petzimin psula. If it doesn't have the poles, you don't have lavad. You can't use that as a wall. That third wall is no wall. You don't have a third wall. You have a two-walled sukkah. It's not kosher." So Ravashi was telling him off. You don't have a kosher sukkah. Now, you don't have that extra tevach that you need. You need an extra handbreadth of a pole for your third wall. So so we showed him, nah, you didn't see it. It's nira mibifnim. There's really an extra pole of a tefach, and it's visible if you're inside it, but you don't see it. It's shavim mibachutz. On the outside, it looks like it's just part of the wall, but on the inside, it actually protrudes inside the sukkah, so it actually is considered like a wall, a third wall. Inami, or the case is that nira mibachutz or shavim mifnim. It's visible only on the outside. You don't see it on the inside. It looks flush, and it looks flush with the wall. You don't see it. So the itmar, and here, and maybe this is where we're up to. I think the itmar, because it's learned. It was said in the laws of Mavoi that when you need to put a lechi, which is this pole, in order to permit carrying in an area, that the rabbis were concerned that it looks too much like it's a mavoi, it looks too much like a public domain. So the rabbi said you need on the fourth wall, you need to put something, because otherwise it looks too much like a public domain. So therefore they would put a lechi, which is this pole. A kaira would mean a beam, is a beam, and a lechi is this like a pole next to the wall. And this way, it'll be like either recognizable that you're adding something, that this is not a public domain, and or the other option is to make something that looks like, that could be considered like a wall, and ultimately it would be kosher. So the Gemara brings this statement that was said about mavoi nira mibachutz v'shava mibifnim, if it's visible only on the outside, but on the inside of this mavoi, of this alley, it looks flush with the wall. You don't see it. Nidoy mishum lechi, it's considered like a lechi, but lechi hainu petzimin, and the lechi works as it's similar to a wall of petzimin, that petzimin are the poles, and it would be considered. This is the petzimin. This is the pole. It's going to be kosher. We're going to consider it a wall. It's going to be similar to if it had petzimin, if it had walls.
Rabbi,
Tefach, it's enough, even if it's only visible on the outside. It's not visible on the inside. That would work. It's lechi hainu petzimin. That's what the Gemara's conclusion is. Lechi. This lechi is considered like petzimin. It's considered a wall, at least for the third wall. Yes, David.
I have a picture. Should I show you the picture?
Yeah.
Rabbi, isn't petzimin a pole, not a wall?
Pole, yeah. But it's considered, but when you have enough, they're considered like a wall.
Oh.
So here, I've got to figure this out now.
The translation I have here, it's calling it patzimin is posts.
A post. Okay, a pole,
Okay.
a post, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's visible from the outside, but even on the inside. The problem is the picture to me is not clear enough. Does anyone understand this picture? I'm
Well,
sorry, I just
You can see the posts from the outside, that's from this front wall here. But you can also see the posts on the inside that you can see from the back wall.
the problem
Which
is I'm not. What are you looking
which
at?
area are we including in this new sukkah?
Yeah, if you read the description,
Oh,
if you read the description.
oh, okay, fine. So lower it a drop because I'm missing a few lines. Visible from the outside, but even on the inside. There's several opinions among the early authorities as to the exact meaning of this term. One relatively simple interpretation is depicted in the diagram. The side posts are positioned outside the alleyway. Consequently, they are visible to those outside the alleyway. To people on the inside, they appear as continuations of the alley wall.
Uh-huh.
So here you got two. I don't know why he did two. You only need one. But
He's showing how something is visible from the outside of the wall, but if you look from the inside, you think that's just a little piece growing out of the top. You don't see the rest of the pole because the bottom part is all covered by the wall.
You have two. You have two because
Right.
there's an alleyway here showing you the alleyway. One is on the right side and one is on the left side.
right. Just for symmetrical purposes, to make it look normal. But
No,
the point
there's
is,
an alley. An alley is between two structures. You can't have just an alley without one with only one side.
Right.
right. Okay, I'm saying symmetrical. Yeah, it looks nicer. But basically, the point is that these two poles, there's a certain thickness to them that you don't know when you're standing on the bottom. You just think that that's just a continuation of the wall. It just becomes taller, but it actually sticks out and covers the next direction. It covers the north side and the south. They actually cover another. They extend, and you don't see that from the inside. And nevertheless, it's kosher for a mavoi. Even the people inside the mavoi are allowed to carry in the mavoi, even though they don't see that there's that extension called a lechi, that there's like an extra pole that is placed there. So that would be this would be that pole that would be considered an extra pole. Okay.
And even have palm trees. See the palm trees?
Leave it up to Rabbi Steinsaltz to make it be creative. Okay, yes. No, something's wrong. Okay. Okay, so that was the previous Gemara, and we explained how they permitted such a thing, that it's really either there is more to it than we explained. There might be a tzuras haPesach, which basically means that this portico is not just a portico. There's also another pole coming down from the portico that causes this to be considered to have a like a doorway area, because there's a tzuras haPesach just means that there's a form of a doorway. There's two side posts and a lintel on top, and that would be the way this portico is situated there, to be like the lintel. The portico is basically the lintel on top, and you have two poles coming down. So that would be considered a tzuras haPesach, to be considered, according to biblical law, a wall. And then rabbinically, you need the tefach, so that you could have, even if it's sticking out. That's the way we explained it. Or and that's the way Rab Kahana seems to hold, because when Rav Ashi came, he saw both. He ended up seeing both. I don't know if it means that story was after he got shown the tefach. Then he says, "Oh, you got both, a tzuras haPesach and the tefach." And he says, "Yes, I hold that. That's the meaning on page 7 where Rava says you need both." Okay, so anyway, that's that previous